It's my pleasure to introduce to you the man who needs no introduction, Mark Zuckerberg.
A standing ovation. How about that? Do you still get those in Silicon Valley?
Yeah, you know, I'm excited to be here. It's good to see all of you.
You excited to have Mark Zuckerberg in Utah? So first, what an honor to have you here at Silicon Slopes Tech Summit in Utah. It means a lot to have you here. So thank you so much for being here.
Excited to be here. Love Utah. I'm glad we were just building a big data center here up in Eagle Rock. Really excited about that. It's like $1 billion project.
It's Eagle Mountain, but that's. I just want you to know that's why you got that response that you got. But
Eagle Rock is in Tahoe.
Eagle Rock is awesome.
Yeah, you know, my bad. All right.
Eagle
awesome.
Rock might
We're
be
off to a great start. Off to a great start.
So recently, you shared in a press conference that one of Facebook's focuses for the next decade is that it is more important to be understood than be liked. Will you just share what you meant by that?
Yeah, I mean, look, let's be real here. I'm not like, communicating is not my best thing, right? You know, I came out here, I've been planning for this, I'm excited about it, and then I messed up the name of our data center within 30 seconds. So I mean, look, when I got started with Facebook, I was 19. And there were so many parts about building a company that I didn't know, right? I didn't know anything about hiring or managing or building a company, and I certainly didn't really know that much about, you know, how to communicate about what we were doing with the world. I mean, I'm an engineer by training, right? I love coding, I like building products, that's kind of the background. You know, my experience, you know, kind of growing up and running the company is, you know, went out, talked about what we did, say some stupid things, get called out for it, and get like, kind of go into a shell, right? And end up being really cautious about how we communicate. So, you know, it worked out okay for a while for the company because you know, we built products that a lot of people really like, and you know, we weren't winning because we were communicating well. We were winning because the products were working well, I think in spite of the fact that we were communicating quite poorly about what we were doing. But broadly speaking, for a long time, the basic approach was, okay, let's try to not like do anything that's going to be too offensive. Right, and we'll kind of explain what we're doing in broad strokes and talk about the mission of what we're doing, which is something that I really believe in, helping to build community and bring people closer together. But you know, I think we just shied away for a long time talking about some of the things that, some of the principles that we believe in that are increasingly controversial in the world. And I just think that we, for one, don't have that luxury anymore. For two, I think that kind of led for a while to a sentiment towards the company that was positive but fairly shallow. Because if you're not kind of out there standing for things that people care about, then you know it's not possible for people to feel that strongly about what you're doing. But so now, you know, I've tried to change our approach more recently. You know, I went out and in Georgetown last year, I gave this speech around our principles around free expression. And you know, that's just one of the areas that I really feel like is under attack right now. You know, increasingly, you know, we're getting called to censor a lot of different kinds of content that makes me really uncomfortable. I think that it kind of feels like the list of things that you're not allowed to say socially keeps on growing, and I'm not really okay with that. I mean, clearly, there are definitely a lot of bad things that we need to go do our job and help get rid of. Terrorism, child exploitation, incitement to violence, things that are going to cause imminent physical harm. And we invest a ton in this. I mean, we have 35,000 people working on content and safety. Our budget on safety at this point is bigger than the whole revenue of our company was when we went public in 2012. And we're a pretty big company then. There were like 1 billion people using our services. So we're focusing a lot on that. But at some point, I just felt like, all right, we got to stand up and say, no, we're going to stand for free expression. And yeah, we're going to take down the content that's really harmful. But the line needs to be held at some point. And I think that this is just, I think it's unfortunate that this is such a controversial thing. You know, when I got started in 2004, it wasn't. You know, it wasn't a thing that people were pushing back on that much. And you know, I think that there probably are a lot of people who agree with the principles on this and want companies to take more of a stand and make that case. And that's just one example. There are a number of other things, you know, fighting for encryption. I think that that's a really important thing. You know, a lot of people out there now are saying that you know, tools for privacy are only important to help bad guys. I don't believe that. I think everyone, you know, this should be the norm. I think everyone should have these tools. So this is going to be, this is, I guess, the new approach. And I think it's going to piss off a lot of people, too. But you know, frankly, the old approach was pissing off a lot of people, too. So, so let's try something different.
So there is a lot of talk that, yeah, please. There is a lot of talk that social media leads to, you know, enhanced polarization in the world. How do you respond to that?
Well, I think you got to look at the data. So first of all, this is something that I care a lot about. The mission of the company, like I just said, is to help people build community and bring the world closer together. So you know, the last thing I want is for our products to be used to divide people or kind of rip society apart in any kind of way. And I think that this is going to be studied for a long time, both how we can develop the products to most effectively help people be open to hearing each other's story and helping people come together in ways like that. That's a lot of what we care about. I think that we can continue to improve what we do to make it positive and more positive over time. But you know, some of the research is now coming in on this, and it goes against the narrative that I think a lot of people have, this mainstream narrative. There's this study, this guy Genskow out of Stanford just released this long study that he had on polarization effects across many different countries around the world. And the finding is that while social media is obviously a global phenomenon, right? And it's in pretty much every country. I mean, we're not in China, we're not in North Korea, but we're pretty much in every other country. That polarization is trending in very different directions in different places. While it's increasing in the US, it is flat in a lot of Europe, it is down in a lot of other countries. So if the main thing that we're driving polarization around the world were that now you're giving everyone a voice and that is somehow having this negative effect, then it doesn't really make sense that you wouldn't see that uniformly everywhere. So that doesn't mean that there aren't some issues that we need to work on, and I really care about making sure that we get that right. But I do think that as the data starts to come in, it's refuting some of these kind of mainstream narratives that weren't grounded in data in the past, that hopefully people are open-minded and are willing to look at the data and aren't so wedded to their narratives about what technology and the internet and social media and our company in particular are doing, and that they'll actually look at what the data says on this.
As you mentioned, you're a product guy at heart. When you look at the next decade, what product innovations are you most looking forward to? What product trends are you excited about?
So there are 3 areas that I'm really focused on. How long do you want to take on this question?
Right, I mean, who wants to hear this?
Let's. I'll try to keep it a little limited for each. All right. The first big thing is I kind of think of you know, in our social lives we have public spaces like town squares or public spaces like that, and we have private spaces like our living rooms or you know, other private or intimate spaces. And you know, I think digitally we need both too. And Facebook and Instagram have kind of evolved to be the digital equivalents of the town squares, where you can interact with a lot of different people that you'd like in lots of different ways. You know, you can stay connected with your friends and family, you can form groups and communities, you can date, you can start businesses, you can host fundraisers, like all the different types of things that you'd want to do. But when I look at our private social apps today, they're still pretty much just texting. And I think when you fast forward, that's not going to be how it is in the future. I think we're going to have private social platforms which are as robust as the digital town square type social platforms that we have, but for all the different ways that we want to interact publicly, small groups, sharing location in private ways, interacting with businesses one-on-one, just being able to hang out, right? I mean, it's some of the stuff around video chat, just making that so you feel more and more present. I think that this push towards delivering through technology this sense of intimacy is, I think, going to be an increasingly important trend over the next 5 to 10 years. I mean, one way that I think about this is that one of the first superpowers that the internet gave us was the ability to connect with anyone around the world. It's very different from how a lot of us grew up, right? I mean, when I grew up, still long distance calls were prohibitively expensive to communicate with anyone outside my town or city. Now we have access to everyone around the world. So that's awesome. Right now instead of growing up in a 10,000 person town, we have a community of billions of people. We have access to all this great content. But I think part of that is a little disorienting too. And I think that we all kind of want a sense of intimacy and community. And I think that a lot of the next set of trends are going to be around building social products that help build that as well. It's not that the digital town squares are going to go away. I think they'll keep on growing, and there's a lot more to do there as well. But I think that the intimate spaces are going to be really important. So that's probably one of the big things that I'm most excited over the next period. I think there's a lot on commerce that's going to be really exciting about empowering individuals, right? That's kind of what I think our company is about, is we want to give every person a voice. We want to empower individuals. On the business side, the way that we think about what we do is, we serve about 140 million small businesses. The vast majority use our products for free. I think it's about 8 million advertised with us, so the vast majority are using it for free. But the way that we kind of think about what we do is that we want every small business or individual entrepreneur to have access to the same kind of sophisticated tools to reach people that historically only the big guys have had access to. And I just think that there's so much more to do on this in terms of building out tools around commerce, making it so that people can have control over their money and assets and move it around. I mean, that's a lot of what is happening in the crypto space. I think that there's a lot of interesting stuff that can happen there. We're in a lot of countries around the world. I kind of think that right now a lot of the payments infrastructure has been built up very nationally. So you look at different countries and it's all, a lot of it is very country specific. It's very hard to do commerce or move money across borders. And I think that could be a lot easier. So there's a lot of really exciting stuff to do there. Do I have time for one more?
Please.
All right. So probably the thing that I think is the craziest that I think we're going to get in the next 10 years is real, true augmented reality and kind of a more mainstream virtual reality. And the reason why I'm so excited about this is because I don't know how many of you have used virtual reality or any of the Quest or the Rift or any of the stuff that we're building. Awesome. Yeah, Quest is doing quite well, and I'm really excited about that and the community that's getting built up around it. So for those of you who've tried this, what you know is that the experience of virtual reality, what it really is it's delivering a feeling of presence, right? You feel like you're right there with another person or in another place, no matter where you actually are physically, right? You could be playing ping pong with someone halfway across the world. In the future, we could be doing this interview, and this could be like hologram you interviewing me.
Right.
And I really think we're gonna get that, and that's gonna be way more powerful than just being able to make a phone call or a video chat. And when you think about some of the stuff that unlocks, I mean, on the social side, that's like the holy grail of experiences of people connecting, stuff that I've just wanted to build for 15 years, but right now we're kind of in this box of building stuff on a phone instead of actually getting to build stuff where people actually feel present. But think about it for the economy, right? Today, so much of people's opportunity is tied to a small number of cities that they may or may not want to move to, and then you do move there, and then like housing is too expensive, and the infrastructure is too congested, and it's like not that good. So why can't it be the case that people can access any opportunity that they want living wherever they want? Well, in a future where you can actually wear normal-looking glasses and be present anywhere that you want to, something like that should start to be possible. It shouldn't really matter where you live. You can live in a place that matches your values, where your family is, that has the community that you want, and access the opportunities that you want in other places. And I think that that's going to be a huge thing for economic growth and for equalizing opportunity, not just across the country, but around the world. Not to mention, it should be good for the environment, because it's a lot easier for us to move bits around than it is for us all to commute and move atoms. All right, I'm done.
That's great. That actually brings up an interesting point and something I wanted to ask you. If you were starting a company today, would you start it in Silicon Valley?
No. No, it's not.
You should move to Eagle Mountain. You could start a company there.
I love Utah. This has got to be like one of the most beautiful states. If I had a free weekend, this is, yeah. Anyway, no, look, Silicon Valley has a lot of, there are a lot of great things about it, and there are a lot of things that that are not as good. But the reason why I moved out there when I got started with Facebook was because when I was 19, I didn't know anything about building a company. At the time, a lot of the tools for building companies weren't as built out as they are now. Now you want to reach people. You have social media. You want you need to spin up servers. You have AWS, right? Back then it was a lot more complicated, right? And I feel like I'm like an old person. Back then it was, but it's looking at the prospect of having to build out data centers. Even leasing starting off and racking servers and doing all that stuff. A lot of the stuff around raising capital, we were kind of in a lull economically at the time. It felt like that was really going to be impossible for someone who had no idea what they were doing and no kind of experience doing all that stuff. And I just think the world is in a different place now. I think the infrastructure exists to be able to do this in more places. And frankly, I think that there are a lot of advantages to building a company that are not in such a monoculture, which I think Silicon Valley as being like an all-tech town. I think it's just there's not as much diversity of how people think about things as you'd like in a lot of ways. I think that there are real advantages, and the infrastructure in Silicon Valley hasn't caught up. The housing is way behind, it's getting more congested. I think that there are a lot of reasons why it would be stronger to start something in a different place at this point. And I like the Bay Area, so I'm not like super negative on it, but I do think on balance, if I were starting from scratch now, I would not pick the Bay Area.
I have to ask you this. Do you feel like you're taking heat on behalf of the entire internet?
That's what leading is. I don't know. I think we're certainly at the center of a lot of issues. When I talk to my peers and folks running other companies, they certainly feel like they have a lot of incoming as well. So I'm always very sensitive on this because it always feels very tough. Whatever challenges you're dealing with feel very, they're very personal. You feel that very acutely, and then other people's challenges, it's easy to abstract away. So I always think you need to be careful about kind of judging the position that you're in compared to others. But objectively, I do think that Silicon Valley or the tech industry and our company in particular are just at the center of a lot of social issues. And what I think we have a responsibility to step up and make progress on a lot of these things. There are real questions that the internet raises, around the democratic process and the integrity there, around free expression versus safety, around privacy and competition and well-being and all these things. And I mean, we need to get these right? And I think a lot of this, it's not that any one company can get it right by themselves. I think we need, it needs to be a broader approach, and it's going to require government as well. But certainly, I feel like we have a big responsibility in this. So I just want to make sure that we do the best that we can on this stuff, and we just take it all super seriously. It weighs on us a lot.
That's great. What are principles you've lived by as a founder, entrepreneur, and of those principles, which ones do you wish you would have adopted much earlier?
So there's a bunch of rules or heuristics that I've developed around hiring, for example, that I think have been helpful. I'm not sure if that's the type of thing that you're asking about, but it's, I mean, the hardest thing for me early on was, because I just started off as, I was an engineer, or, I wasn't even really an engineer, I was a student, right? I thought I was going to be an engineer when I graduated. And, when you're building something yourself, you kind of have all the meetings in your head, right? It's like you don't need to articulate the principles so clearly. It's like you kind of can make all the trade-offs on everything from architecture to product to marketing to just all these things, and you're kind of just, you have the context to trade this off. And I think it's really easy when you start building something to underestimate how much context you need to put out there and how clear you need to be about what you're trying to do. So, most of my mistakes early on in building the company were about not being clear enough internally about what we were trying to do. I mean, there's this very famous episode where like in 2006, a couple years into building the company, Yahoo tried to buy us. And so they offered a ton of money, and a lot of the people who I'd hired at the point, they were kind of experienced technology executives, and this was like all of their startup dream come true, right? They joined, and then within a year or a few months, like the company had the opportunity to exit for this large amount of money, and I really failed through that period to communicate what we were trying to do and what we stood for, and in the absence of that context, then of course it was a rational thing for people to think that this was like a good outcome for us to have. And that was a really difficult period. That was actually, the last few years have been challenging because there are so many social issues that we're at the center of that we need to help resolve, but that was actually the hardest period for me in running the company.
Early on was harder than the past few years.
That piece in 2006, and the reason, because literally the team fell apart, right? I mean, it was, I turned down this offer to sell the company. The management team, who were a bunch of pretty experienced folks, but who hadn't spent a lot of time working at Facebook, weren't that steeped in what we were trying to do. The group basically fell apart. Within I think it was 18 months after that, every single other person on the management team either quit or it was just so dysfunctional that I had to fire them. And most of them quit. And that was really challenging because I think I was like 22 at the time. So again, it's like I hadn't learned most of the lessons that I have learned to this point on managing. But I kind of feel like when you have internal team cohesion and you have a team that believes in something, you can get a lot of things done and you can handle a lot of adversity. But when that starts to break down, it becomes very hard to get things done. And even so, through the other big challenges that we've had to navigate over time, not just the last couple of years, but after we went public, right, we had a big business model challenge. We were transitioning from a desktop and web-based business to mobile. Our app wasn't in the space that I wanted it to be. We didn't have ads in Newsfeed yet, so we weren't sure if that was going to work. And we went public, and our market cap got cut in half within the first year. And people doubted whether we were going to be able to make this transition to mobile. And empirically, that's not a crazy thing to doubt because a lot of technology companies basically die or really lose their way during these big technology shifts, right? So of which going from web to mobile was certainly one. But through that period, we were able to maintain very good team cohesion internally. Everyone had a strong sense of mission. They knew what we were there to do. They believed in the products. They cared about connecting people and bringing the services to more people around the world. So it didn't end up being that challenging of a period in the grand scheme of things. Not that many people quit. People saw through the challenge that we needed to go do, and we came out of that well. But the internal team cohesion thing is a really big deal. I think that, and that's probably applicable to all the different companies that you're all working on, and I'm sure you all have your own versions of these stories. But if you can be clear about the principles and make sure that the team is aligned on that, you can perform miracles, and without that, everything becomes so painful.
Who are your mentors? Who do you call for advice?
Well, I think that it's different people for different things. I've become more religious.
Really?
Yeah. I think that there's that's not really a mentorship thing, but it's, but
kind of.
I do think that there's a scale. I don't know. The last few years have been really humbling for me, right? I thought I knew a lot about how to build something, and I don't know, I think that there's just a comfort in knowing and having confidence that there are things that are bigger than you. And to me, that's what giving people a mission is when you're building a company, right? And that's why talking about principles and laying that out so clearly is so important. It's also why I have so much faith in democracy overall. That's why I care so much about giving people a voice, right? I don't know, I think at some point in order to move forward, given how complex modern society is and all the challenges that we face, you have to believe in things that are bigger than yourself, no matter what form that takes. And I personally grew up, I'm Jewish, and so I grew up with that, and that culture has been really important to me. But certainly, I think it's a combination of the challenges that we've been through as a company, and having kids, right? So now, I have 2 girls, 4 and 2, and I just want them to grow up with those traditions too. So, yeah. Anyhow, probably that's kind of a different answer than you were probably expecting, and maybe not even an answer to the question, but feels sort of relevant.
Yeah, that's incredible. You're religious. I love it. What can you teach us about creating mission and values for a company? You've talked a lot about that already, but how do you actually create a mission? How do you actually create values for a company that means something?
Well, I don't know if you create them. So early on, someone gave me this advice that we were talking about values early on. It's I think it's kind of corporate to write down values. I was really wrong about that. You really want to be clear about what you stand for. But I don't know, maybe it's both corporate and you want to be clear about what you stand for. And so someone gave me this advice, which was, you have values, so you better just write down what they are. Because if you write down, I think companies write down sometimes what they want their values to be, and then it's dissonant with what you actually believe and how you actually operate. And part of building a company is trying to communicate to a group of people, both internally and outside the company, what, how you're going to operate. So I kind of think what you need to do is just write down and encode and try to encode that and capture that. And you need to be honest about it, right? And it's not it shouldn't be some crap about how you wish you operated or some platitudes. It should actually be how you operate. And I guess in writing down values, I've always thought that there is this tendency to just write down platitudes, right? Stuff that no one really disagrees with, right? Be honest. Okay, yeah, obviously you should be honest, right? Everyone should be honest. If you're not going to be honest, don't work at our company, leave. But that's not really a trade-off, right? You're not giving something up to be honest. So that's not. I think that's kind of hard to kind of have. That should be a given, right? Not one of the things that kind of defines the company as having a different culture. So, I think you want values that people can legitimately disagree with. So inside our company, our values are things like move fast and be open. Ironically, I mean, I'm up here talking about how the external communication of the company hasn't been good over time, and I think that that's true. But I think the internal communication since that Yahoo episode that I was talking about has actually been a strength of kind of how we built up the company, and that's because at every step along the way, we've erred on the side of being more open internally. We always, I do a Q&A with all employees every week, where not only will I answer pretty much any question that anyone has, but we go out of our way to get the hardest questions. We've built up new processes over time as the company has scaled, so that way, people can now vote on the top questions that they want to get answered. People can submit questions anonymously, and then at the top of the Q&A, I'll take the top 5 voted questions to make sure that I'm answering the hardest things. So it's all these things kind of build up this culture inside the company where you're just really open about what's going on. You answer the questions honestly, and that sets a tone. And of course, it just makes information available to people broadly if they can ask me anything. And it makes it so I, as CEO, can know what people are honestly wondering about around the company, which is a valuable signal for me in running the company. Now, that's not the only way to run a company. I think you can legitimately disagree with that, right? I mean, like Apple, for example, is on the complete opposite side of the spectrum, and they're obviously extremely successful too. All right, so be open, I think, is something that one can disagree with, but is how we operate. It's authentic to us, and therefore I think it's a good articulation of a value. It's been valuable to write that down because that way, as we've scaled, we've been able to encode and build up more processes and tools to make sure that we can live up to that value at scale.
So we've been talking a lot about, at this conference over the past 2 days, mental health. And just the challenges of the loneliness of building a company, of being an entrepreneur, the loneliness of being a founder, what it takes, the fact that when you're building it, nobody cares what you're doing. You had a little bit different experience. A lot of people cared. But most people, as they're growing a company at the very beginning, you know what I mean? It's very lonely, and it leads to mental health issues. And there's also criticism that social media leads to mental health issues. How do you stay grounded?
I don't know, I think a lot of it is some of the stuff that, well, personally, and I'll talk about the social media part of
talk about that in a second.
In a minute. I mean, for me, I think the answer to this is probably the answer, I can answer your mentorship question now, but but I think the answer.
By the way, I expected Bill Gates, not God, but I'm glad I got
I was not saying that God is a mentor. That would be like the opposite of what I was trying to get across. And Bill Gates has been, especially on the philanthropy side. He is. He's a huge role model, both in how he built the company and as a model for me personally in terms of once you've built something that is successful, what are you supposed to do next? And one of the main lessons that he taught me is you should start early, right? Because philanthropy, just like any other skill that you want to build up, takes practice. And if this is something that I want to dedicate more of my time to in 10, 15 years, then we better start now and get practice on how that works. But no, I mean, I think part of staying grounded is like, I think you need to understand the context that you operate in, and work is important, and a lot of you are doing really important things, and I hope that the stuff that we're doing has a positive impact and has an important impact on people. But at the end of the day, we're all people, and you need your family and your friends and communities around you of things that are interesting to you that are not just work, and I think we all need to feel like we're parts of things that are bigger than ourselves, and I just think that that's important. And so my family and friends have been an incredibly important part of how I've stayed grounded. But yeah, and I do just think just managing your time well. I mean, you're all doing jobs where the reactive incoming in anything that any one of us is doing could take all of our day. And I think making sure that you just have the discipline to say, no, look, I'm going to deal with reactive stuff for this amount, but I need to spend a bunch of my time just on stuff that's going to push the ball forward. And then at some point you have to go home, and yeah, stuff comes up, and you don't always, I try to put my girls to bed every night, and some nights I don't get to, but generally, like you want to try to draw some boundaries so you can do that. That's important to me. All right, so to the social media side of this, maybe a little more concrete, but we've studied this a lot. I mean, because obviously I want our products to be good for people, right? And the research on this is that, like anything, not all internet use or social media use is the same. If you're using products to stay connected with people and you're having meaningful interactions, then that is associated with a lot of positive aspects of well-being, right? You feel more connected, you feel happier, you feel less lonely over time. That's correlated with feeling healthier, better outcomes there. But if what you're doing is you're using the internet or even if you're just using our products to just scroll through content passively and it's just have fun, but not actually interact with people. It's not that that's bad. It just isn't associated with the same positive aspects of well-being that connecting with people is. So I just think what our company is about is giving people a voice, helping people connect. It's that duality of those two things together. And on the connection side, I just always want to make sure that stays front and center. So a couple of years ago, we made some really big changes in our products that like one change, and the changes were designed to make sure that, in Facebook and Instagram, the content that you're seeing is generally going to be about your friends, things that are going to encourage interactions between people that are going to be meaningful. We made one single change that wiped out 50 million hours of viral video watching a day in order to prioritize more content from people's communities. Because if we showed the viral videos, people would spend more time in the products. But then at the end, they would tell us, hey, I'm not necessarily getting from Facebook what I want, right? You guys are the company that's supposed to help me connect with people. And there are lots of places I can go to watch videos. I come to you because I want to help connect with people. So yeah, I mean, we took down the amount of usage, and I think, what was it? It was a couple of months later, we had, I think it was the biggest stock drop in the history of the stock market. I think we lost like $100 billion of market cap in a day when we report our earnings. So, but I mean, look, it's, I think we're here to do good things in the world, right? So I mean, that's, we're gonna focus on what we think is going to deliver the best experience for people, and I think that research is also, that also has mapped to how I think about my girls using, my daughters using products, for example. Like I'll let them do video chat with their families because that's about connecting with people. I think that's great, but in general, not as much of the, just passive content consumption.
You seem like a very intentional person. And as you go about, and I'm sure you had good intentions, and all the products you've launched and purchased, and launching Facebook and all these different things. How do you manage unintentional consequences?
Well, I think that this has probably been the biggest lesson of the last couple of years or few years is you have to be more proactive, right? So, when I think about what we're doing, either in terms of fighting different kinds of harmful content or things like that, or certain privacy issues, just because of where we came from as a company, we used to have a more reactive stance, which it made sense when I was a student in a dorm room, right? It's people would post stuff, and back then we didn't have a business that could support having tens of thousands of people on a safety team, and the AI technology hadn't evolved to the point where you could meaningfully write a machine learning algorithm that could identify some of the bad stuff. But at some point along the way that changed, right? Where now it is possible for us to make those investments. And the AI technology, while it's not perfect yet and it still requires a lot of investment to get to where we want it to be, now it is better to the point where we can do a lot more proactively. So as one example, I was talking before about like actually the truly bad types of content that you want to get rid of, like terrorist propaganda for recruiting people. We built an AI system along with this counterterrorism team that we have at the company that now we are able to flag and identify and take down It's 99% of the terrorist content that we take down, our systems get before anyone sees it on the service. So it's like someone posts it, down. Okay, so, and so I kind of feel like once you have the ability to do stuff like that, you also have the responsibility to do that. And I just think, frankly, we were a little late to that. It wouldn't have been possible to do this stuff in 2012 when we went public. Right around that time, I mean, again, it's like our whole budget on this stuff today is greater than our whole revenue was there. So, we couldn't have done back then what we're doing now. And the AI was not ready yet. But, I think a lot of this stuff we really started ramping up very seriously in 2016, 2017. And, I think maybe it should have been possible starting in 2015 to get ahead of it. And, I mean, this is important stuff. So do I wish we'd started a couple years earlier? Yeah. So I think that's the big lesson. Same thing on the privacy side with developers and some of the issues that we had. Like, and this is the lesson from Cambridge Analytica, right? I mean, so you had a developer who people gave access to the data, and then the developer turned around and sold the data. It was against our policies, but rather than waiting for someone to report that, we should have had systems that could proactively go and identify more suspicious behavior. And now we've built up a lot more of that stuff. But for the next set of issues that are going to come in the future, we're going to judge ourselves by, you obviously can't identify everything in advance, but are we thinking through what the unintended consequences might be and being more proactive about finding those issues? I do just think we have a responsibility to do that.
We started this conversation around the idea that Facebook, and something that you said, that it's more important to be understood than liked. What would you have us understand about you, Mark Zuckerberg?
I don't know. I think I haven't been great about communicating about the company. I am especially bad about communicating about myself. There's an awkwardness to it, right? But I think probably the biggest misperception is, I hope this comes across, but like, I really care about what we're doing, right? The decisions that we make when they're controversial, it's like I didn't get into this because I was trying to build a business or sell a bunch of ads or make money. I happen to think that advertising is a great model so that way you can offer everyone a service for free, because if you want to give every single person in the world a voice, then you want people to be able to afford that. But like for me, this was never about kind of that side of things. And I just think I think some people just assume that every company must only care about that, about making money. And so any kind of policy or any decision must only be motivated by that. Or I think some people might just be kind of willfully ignoring kind of the obvious approach that we take for stuff in order to smear us. But I do just think in general, the principles around empowering individuals, leveling the playing field, giving everyone a voice, not just the powerful people. The powerful people are always going to have a voice, right? It's always the people who are criticizing and saying that more stuff needs to be censored are never the people who are actually at risk of being censored themselves. But they have their ways of getting stuff out. So I don't know, I kind of just feel like someone needs to stand up for giving everyone a voice. Someone needs to stand up for making sure that individual businesses do have the same tools and abilities that larger businesses have. Because at the end of the day, the way that we create an economy and a society that's stable is you want broad-based economic success that comes from small businesses everywhere succeeding, not just a handful of companies. And by the way, that's important for social cohesion too, right? It's like, how many of the small businesses that people build end up being kind of physically the hubs in their communities that help bring people together in addition to supplying jobs, right? So that needs to happen. So I don't know, that's me. That's what I care about.
I love it. So this is my last question for you, because I know you have to go. You're young. We're actually very close to the same age. Our lives are quite a bit different. I recently, paid off my student loans last month.
Congratulations.
But I wonder if you think about, even though you are young, if you think about what you want your legacy to be. What would you want your legacy to be?
Well, that. I mean, what I just talked about. I mean, it's I do believe that a lot of the debates that are being had right now around, people are really questioning at a fundamental level, is giving people a voice good? And I believe that there is a pendulum that is swinging, and the pendulum will go back in the other direction towards voice and free expression, and I hope that I can play a part in that. And similarly, I think in terms of individuals connecting, I think right now, for a while when we got started, I think that there was a period where there was more positive press and coverage than anyone ever deserved. So I think to some degree, all the scrutiny I think is fair now as well. But I think people really have turned from thinking that tools that help people connect is going to be a powerful thing and positive for our communities, positive for social cohesion and democracy. And I think the pendulum is swinging there too. But I think that the formula throughout history has been that empowering individuals, more voice, more connection between people. That's you build strong communities, and that's how we make progress together. And if we can do this around the world, I don't know. I think it'll hopefully lead to more prosperity and people living more fulfilling lives everywhere. And if we can be a part of that, then that's kind of what I hope to do.
Thank you so much for coming to Utah. Ladies and gentlemen, Mark Zuckerberg.